Welcome all to the Hope Wanted from Rust to Sustainability Scenario Workshop as part of our 2020 EPIC-N free webinar and event series. My name is Marshall Curry. I'm the EPIC-N Program Manager, and I'll be moderating our webinar today. Our presenters were planning to do this at the conference in Indiana, but due to COVID-19, instead, they're volunteering their time, going above and beyond the call of duty to make this workshop happen. All of the series events are going to be are presented in hopes that you and communities and universities can use the resources shared to help with your response and recovery to this pandemic. Anyone can attend the live tapings and view the rest of the webinars that have been recorded in this series. You can do that by visiting our webpage. I'd like to take a moment to briefly share a little bit about our organization and in general. The Educational Partnerships for Innovation in Communities Network, or EPIC-N for short, is the nonprofit association of higher education institutions that adopt the award-winning EPIC model to facilitate high-impact, large-scale university, local government, and/or community partnerships. EPIC-N supports autonomous university programs across the globe that connect the human capital of their university with their local cities, counties, and/or community staff to improve the quality of life of all involved. All of our programming is presented by our member programs, the Ford Foundation, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Thank you to these groups for their generous support. With that, I'll introduce our speakers, the first of which is Alana Balrich. She's the program manager at Sustainable Communities Collaborative, which is the EPIC program at Penn State University. She's been running a program since 2013. This is our general slide that talks about each of our programs. We've been doing this slide for every one of our webinar series if a EPIC program is involved, so participants can know a little bit more about each program as they get into the presentation. She averages a lot of involvement with her program at 50 projects and 30 unique partners each year. Most of the program is supported by the university, and she does do a little, but not much, to student reports and presentations being delivered to their partners. She'll be joined by Eric L. Ewell, the Director of Continuing Education at Penn State Greater Allegheny. I don't know if I pronounce Allegheny right, but I always try. And you'll learn more about Eric and who he's joined with, Aaron Wiggum, the Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Chancellor's Office at the same university or Commonwealth campus of Penn State. They'll talk more about how they're connected with Alana's work during their presentation. The second group, or workshop group, will be led by Daniel Fernandez. He is a professor and the faculty director of the EPIC program called Sustainable City Year program at the California State University, Monterey Bay. He runs a relatively small program. You can watch one of his previous webinars that's been highlighted during this series to learn more about his program. And he'll be joined by some folks from all over the world. Juan Jose Gutierrez is another faculty member of CSU MB, and Goyo, I can't pronounce your last name, I'm sorry, but Goyo will be joining, and Alvaro Gutierrez will also be joining, and both Goyo and Alvaro are joining us from Spain right now, so thank you for their time in the evening, spending it with us. And finally, our third group will be led by Brandon Bourne, who's an EPIC-N board member, faculty co-director of the Livable City Year initiative, and runs the EPIC program at the University of Washington, or which is the EPIC program at the University of Washington. His program started in 2016, and he has seen really good results with the projects that they've been initiating, and they're in the middle range of size of our programs. They've been partnering with some larger scale communities up in the Seattle region. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our amazing presenters to give you a quick summary of what their scenario or problem statements are. And then we'll start getting into the breakout. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Alana. And Alana, you can just tell me to go to the next slide when you're ready.
Yes, good day, I guess, is the, and maybe good evening, the appropriate greeting. So glad you could join us. And next slide. So greetings from Penn State University. I thought I put this slide up because it gives you the kind of situation that I'm in. It feels very much scattershot all over the place. Penn State has 23 Commonwealth campuses that deliver, education across the state. I think it is unique. Penn State is also the land-grant university with smaller campuses everywhere. I'm located right smack in the middle, University Park. That's the major hub, and all the other blue dots on the map are our Commonwealth campuses. Next slide, please.
Sorry.
Oh, there. So yeah, so we're the big star in the middle. That's the main campus. And I color-coded this one a little bit. You see the red dots. We tried rolling out the EPIC-N model to some of our Commonwealth campuses through a volunteer program. They submitted proposals and said, we'll try this. This was 3 years ago. This was the final years, and we are assessing how that went. Bottom line is, these things don't happen on their own. And I'll update you in another webinar, maybe in the future. I also have a couple orange spots. What we did find out that we can work effectively over distances. Those 2 orange spots were facilitated through me at the main campus. The one to the left or to the west, Du Bois, not Dubois, yeah. That was a class held on that Commonwealth campus addressing a community issue. The other one worked the other way around. That was both a class at the university addressing an issue on that campus and another class on that campus addressing an issue closer to the main campus. So in other words, to make things even more complicated and scattershots, yeah, we work over distances in a variety of ways. However, for today, we are at the yellow star on the west side of Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh, the Greater Allegheny campus, formerly known as McKeesport, Penn State, McKeesport. Next slide, please. So we have a campus with a launch box and a community, and we think there's an opportunity. But here I want to hand it over to my colleague Aaron or Eric to talk a little bit about their situation. Aaron and Eric co-manage the launch box, which is an enterprising outfit. You'll explain it. Aaron or Eric, please explain about your situation.
Sure. Thank you, Alana. I'll chime in here. Good day to everyone. It's a pleasure to be on this call. Marshall, thanks for all your hard work and your diligence, even amidst this crisis that you persevered through, and you brought us to this EPIC-N conference. I'm so glad that you held on to the date and to the event rather, and that we're actually doing this. So kudos to you for your hard work and all of your team and everyone involved. So some of the work that we did, it started from a revitalization effort on campus. So we had a little bit of through a revitalization effort and some analytical meetings that we had on campus, we kind of figured out that we had not fully done our part in the community in which we reside. And so we knew that the community wanted more from us, but we didn't know what they wanted and how to get it to them. What we found out is, through our own admission and through our own introspective look internally on campus, we found out that we just hadn't really been playing our part in the whole community scene and how we could help to turn over a blighted, disenfranchised, marginalized community. Just to give you some perspective on that, the mayor of the community tore down over 300 properties the first year and another 300 properties the second year. So we're talking about a lot of condemned buildings, a lot of, drug infested, crime infested, one of the highest crime rates per capita for a suburb city. And so there was a lot of statistical things that were blighted, and we just didn't feel like we were quite doing our part. And so as we took that look in the mirror and we did a reassessment, we figured out that we needed to do more to actually become engrafted into the community. One of the things that happened is, with Alana first reference, is along the same time, President Barron initiated what we call Invent Penn State. Invent Penn State has an arm which is called the Launchbox Series. There are 21 launch boxes throughout the state of Pennsylvania. We happen to be number 20 that launched. And so back in 2017, we figured that a business incubator would be a great way to contribute back to the community. And what we did was join a partnership with the mayor's office, bridging the two together. So they provide us a space, rent and utility free. And then in turn, we pump businesses back into the community, which will help to spur economic development, which will help to create a sense of pride and a sense of hope. So we put together a team, which is called the Street Team, comprised of some staff and some faculty. And the Street Team went and held a series of meetings, 2 meetings, and I kind of referenced this in my write-up in my profile, 2 meetings that were held the same day with 2 separate stakeholder groups. One, the ministerial community, and the other one was with the business owners, small business owners in the area. And once we went through a series of questions and a series of, a deep, intensive analytical meeting with them, both groups unanimously said, our leading question was, what does McKeesport need the most? And both groups unanimously said, hope. Unanimously, undoubtedly. And so the Street Team was left with this daunting task of how do we generate hope. We had to go back to campus. We threw mud on the wall. We fought with each other. We argued a little bit. That's not hope. We kind of milled through a bunch of a litany of different suggestions and solutions. And finally, we started to meet people where their needs were. And so we started off with a turkey drive. We went and we had a jazz series that we started, which is called A Taste of Jazz. So what we did was we started creating community. Cultures are built around music and food, right? And so what we did was we featured a Grammy-winning jazz artist, and we featured a new a restaurateur who was starting a soul food business. And we said, okay, how about we bring that person in and we give a tasting of their food. We charge $15 and we let the community come in. And so it was a huge success. There were people pouring out of the building. And that was the beginning of creating a culture or a subculture around the hope that they were looking for. And then so we went on, we did a turkey drive. Eric led that effort, did an amazing job. We got fresh produce from a local distributor. We were able to provide full Thanksgiving dinners, soup to nuts. Even they got a box of cake with icing. Everything was provided for them. All they had to do was call in and say they wanted a meal, and then we had it already packed as they walked out the door. We did a turkey drive. We fed 50 families the first year. We did a toy drive, provided toys for kids for Christmas. And then the next year, we doubled our numbers. And in the following year, we added some more to the numbers. And so what we started to do was create hope by becoming necessary and meeting people at their needs. And so the relationship with the city and with the community has truly been a win-win-win. It's been a symbiotic relationship where we've been able to share and grow with each other. And I'll tell you what, now we've created so much momentum that now we don't even have to put some stuff up for advertisement. They're already calling us, expecting, and which are clear signs that now we've become engrafted in the community. Eric, I'll let you come in.
Yeah, and so what Aaron just explained was the framework of rebuilding a partnership with the community that had been broken. So now we have now created some semblance of this concept of hope. But now we've gone past that concept of hope, and we're now talking about concrete things, right? So now we're talking about building cohorts of youth that can now go in and rehab buildings versus tearing buildings down. We've now also transitioned from just giving out turkeys to now helping people find jobs. You know, 1 year we found 18 jobs for 18 men, some who had criminal backgrounds and things of that nature, and they were making $50,000 a year with full benefits. So, you know, we've transitioned from this very large question of how do we create hope, and we just began to act. I think sometimes the challenge becomes is as universities, we're planners, right? We want to plan everything, and we want to have estimated outcomes and things of that nature. But we had to throw all of those things to the wind, honestly, and say, how do we create hope? And now that hope has turned into something that's going to be much bigger and larger and sustainable beyond my time and beyond Aaron's time, if we manage it from a university perspective properly, right? So so now again, we're talking about those things. In addition to that, you know, the mayor has now perked up, and he's tearing down buildings and helping us find ways to bring entrepreneurs into the community. So now it's becoming a destination place, right? So if you want to start your business, you want to go to McKeesport because you have Penn State who's going to help you write your business plan and help you do your marketing. You have the mayor who's going to help you find a building at a very low cost, right? So these are the things now, again, that took us from this broken relationship now to a vital partner. So much so that now we have to really analyze every request for partnership because we don't have the bandwidth and the capacity to do it all. You know, people think Penn State and they see 23 campuses and don't realize we're just one of 23. We're not Penn State, the you know, the larger body. So, you know, so I said all that to say this is that, you know, for us, the sustainability piece is really going to come through continued partnership and continued innovation. We have to maintain a level of innovation that's going to continue to draw new people, new partnerships, and new opportunities to our region. And we're just excited to be a part of it, to be completely honest. I'm not sure, Aaron, if there's anything that I missed that you wanted to hit before.
No, I think that was great. We've partnered. I think one thing I will add though is that we've created partnerships and collaborations with just about every industry. So Marshall, when you were talking about cross sector, we crossed all the sectors. We every bridge, every alley, every street. We've crossed all the sectors, and we brought basically a network of people. So if it's something that we can't do internally, we can actually hand you off to another entity, and we've made those connections so that we've also become a resource center, a one-stop shop. You can come to us, and even if we don't have the answer, we'll connect you with the person who does. We're doing work with the RIDC parks, and we're doing work with developers and you name it, banks. We're doing first-time home buyer seminars to help the community be able to purchase. So all of these things speak to the sustainability, not just of the Mon Valley Launchbox or Penn State McKeesport Innovation Hub, or not even Penn State at large. It's the whole community that wins. When you create this win-win environment that completely dovetails all of our experiences together, then all of a sudden there's a momentum towards a brighter future. And so sometimes it can sound pie in the sky, but I tell you, it's been heartwarming to see it actually happen and live it out. So thank you for this time.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Aaron and Eric. So I think our audience can hear the enthusiasm and passion. The intentions are clear, sustainability for everybody, a better future, as the Epic End model clarifies. The problem is, underlying, there are still town-gown relationship gaps. We have heard a very positive picture of the community, and we wouldn't be here if indeed all was well. There are significant disconnects in McKeesport between the university that have their roots in former actions, and we won't get into that. That's in the past. What we need to do now is build bridges, and that's what our call-out section is for. So with that, off to the next presenter. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all for your presentation talking about how a Commonwealth campus is trying to revitalize a local community and how the EPIC model could maybe help with this problem of building those bridges. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Dan Fernandez and his team from Spain. They're going to tell you a little story about how they got connected and generally what their problem statement scenario is.
Sorry about that, I was muted. I want to just start off with a little story, and then I'm going to turn over to Juan Jose. Some of you have seen some of my other presentations that I've given during this conference, during the online conference. There's 2 others. So if you want to know more about my program, you can take a look at those. I'll just really briefly say a couple things as I'm telling my story. But we've been going 5 years. I'm the coordinator, and I'm also a faculty member at CSU MB. And I've been here for 24 years. And I've known Juan Jose the entire time, pretty much. We're in different colleges in the university, but we came in the same cohort. And that's the nice thing about being at the same place for a long time. You get to know a lot of the other faculty. And like I said, I've been running my program for 5 years, but last fall, during an earthquake drill, when I was teaching a class, I teach physics, I was teaching it, and it was in the building that Juan Jose is in. I had to leave the building because it was an earthquake drill, and Juan Jose had to leave the building, and we started talking, and I told him about the program. I asked him if he had heard about it. He told me he was working in Spain, and that's really how this whole thing started. And as a result of that conversation, I told him about the EPIC conference. He signed up for the conference like by the next day, talked to the colleagues in Spain, and was really excited about this opportunity. Of course, and was going to present in Indiana as well. And of course, with the whole COVID-19 situation, everything has changed. But I feel really fortunate that he was able to join today and bring on several of our colleagues from Spain, including his son Alvaro, who's also on the call today. And one little story about that is when he was in junior high, I was working at a nearby school, and he was a junior high student in that school then. And now he's off in Spain doing this great work with the community there. So there's a lot of really interesting connections that have come about that you're getting to see right before you right now. So with that, maybe I'll turn this over to Juan Jose. Juan Jose, were you on? I tried to give you a little message a minute ago, but it said you might have dropped off. Are you still on?
I don't see him. Him, so let's hand it over to Alvaro.
I'll hand it over to Alvaro. Yep.
Oh.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. He fell off. So it's just Ngoyo and I.
Okay, no problem.
So Ngoyo can speak to this a lot better than I can. We're trying to work together from on both the institutional level and smaller organizations and also larger umbrella organizations, trying to get everything working together. Goyo works with Pura Vida in León, which is a part of a larger group called Cooperativas, and they're trying to foment some changes to how we work on the smaller level, on the community level, to make things more sustainable, to give a future to people who actually want to stay there. We have a large demographic issue. Okay, can we go forward on the slide, please? No.
Sorry, I think there's a delay. It's coming. On the objective slide, is that what you want?
So the main idea is that anyone who tries to do something alone isn't really going to be able to do very much at all. But everyone wants to change something. We used to think that people were content to just administer the decline, but people are willing but maybe unable to be more active as you know, catalysts for change. But if they feel they're alone, if they feel they can't count on anybody else, things are going to start moving forward more slowly. So we're in conversations with the municipality of Boñar, which is the large but it's not the capital of the entire region, but it's de facto it is. It's the center of economic and social life there. And here, maybe I don't know how translation might work to get Ngoyo into this.
Go ahead and have him join and present, and we'll just keep it short. Next, like 1 or 2 minutes, it'll be good.
Right. Ngoyo, si pudieses presentar tú 1 o 2 minutos, yo traduzco lo que dices y ya les pasamos a los siguientes para movernos.
He's still there.
Está silenciado, Ngoyo.
Some technical difficulties. Let me unmute him. See if I can unmute him physically from here. No, I can't.
Ngoyo, perdona, que estás silenciado.
Thank you.
You're trying to unmute, Marshall?
No, we're trying to get Goyo to unmute.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Well,
estábamos. Muy bien.
Thank you. Perdonar. I try to explain the nuclear things about our work here. My experience is in planification in India with Vicente Ferrer and Anantapur. We are a rural development trust. 35,000 kilometers cuadrados surface for the development to the more poor people in India. This is my experience in the anterior time. Now I work here in León, Tunea with Álvaro, and we are in the new idea for this area. The idea is front the despoblamiento de 70 percentage of less people in the area in 15 years, and we want to recuperate the land, the communal lands, to utilize the permaculture concept and the ecology and the economy and social perspective vision. Now we have a document with the principal concepts for explain this our government. And the government is interested now in promote in our area this plan, no? This program, and we want to make a joint alliance with Juan José and Álvaro in our comarca, our condado, for make the first experience in this concept. Thank you.
All right, so quickly with the problems so that we can move on to the next guys. We're a bit stopped right now because, well, obvious reasons, right? We need to get back into contact with all the different people we're trying to organize, and well, the help on an institutional level from the deputation, from on the national level from Europe and the rest. Well, we have to see what's going to be available once things go back to normal. So we had to pick up almost as if we had done absolutely nothing to this point other than meet each other very soon. And I'm actually kind of excited for it.
Thank you all. And I really want to echo one thing that Juan Jose told me about your work, is that he's really looking forward to the EPIC model and the network, the people in the network, to share with him and his group today suggestions, steps, resources, processes that might help them build the connectivity they want to see in Leon and in their region. So when you're if you're thinking of going to their breakout, that's kind of the resources and support they're looking to build out. And with that, I'll hand it over to our next presenter, Brandon Bourne, to talk about our third problem statement and/or scenario briefly.
Hi all. Really happy to see everyone from around the world, and I just want to thank Marshall for organizing this, and I'm very pleased that we're able to get together even in this virtual space. I'll start with the problem statement. Well, first of all, I'm at the University of Washington, and for those who are unfamiliar with our setting, we're in the city of Seattle, in the Puget Sound, and we're surrounded. We have two sister campuses within about 15 miles of our main campus, and we sort of think of ourselves as a three-headed campus, but sometimes we don't function that way. I'm sure you all know of the politics between campuses. We are in a location that has, as you may know, we have a lot of economic growth in the tech sector specifically, and this has led to we have several cities that are big, growing fast, fairly wealthy, and there's a bifurcation in the cities that have wealth and those that do not. So our problem statement, just to put that up front, is how do we design a financial model to meet the needs of our smaller, oftentimes rural and suburban communities? And particularly what has become very relevant right now is what are our roles both at the University of Washington and LCY, but also as EPIC schools in working with our communities in a post-COVID-19 environment. So how do we get here? We went, so this is one of my favorite slides. This reminds me of one of those big graphs where it says all of the things are in this graph, right? That's how we used to pay for our programs. We were a relatively large program. We were fully paid by our large community partners, and we had one partner per year. So we stuck pretty close to the traditional EPIC model. Last year, just as an example, our city was Bellevue, Washington, which is just across Lake Washington from the city of Seattle. And that was about a 30 project year, maybe 31, depends on how you count. And our budget was $300,000. Again, all paid for by the municipal partner. Can you jump to the next slide, Marshall? And this is what we've moved to this year. So part of our challenge is that we decided to turn or make a programmatic pivot to serve smaller communities and less well-resourced communities. Because most cities can't take on, we don't need $300,000, but our fixed costs are probably half of that. And so we know that we need to get at least that amount to stay viable. The question then became, how could we build a model that would keep economic viability while also bringing aboard smaller communities that really needed planning, community development, public health, all the kinds of things that universities can bring, and have very limited budgets and staffs. So in this pivot, we built a financial model. We began to get a lot of partners, and then COVID hit. And so just to give a sense of what happened for us, all of our local community partners are, of course, now worried about making their city budgets, and we lost $200,000 in contracts in 4 communities in 3 weeks. So we lost our entire budget in 3 weeks. And so this is our new reality at UW. We have, we now are doing multiple community partners, and frankly, we learned from the EPIC network. We really reached out over time and spoke with people at conferences, webinars, looking at how other programs worked with small communities, and we've borrowed extensively from them. So we now have multiple partners and a much smaller price tag on almost an a la carte kind of basis. And our requirement for working with a community is that we want longer term, really meaningful and impactful relationships. So it doesn't have to be 1 year. It might be more than that, and it doesn't have to be a lot of programs or projects per year. If we could do 3 to 5 projects a year with a small community over 3 to 5 years, that's a tremendous impact on community. So right now we are working on, we have a large community partner, that's a county, it's King County where Seattle's located. We have a very small community for us anyhow, of about 4,000 people. And right now, the other is kind of the big mystery, right? So we have fallen back onto a little bit of university support. We had a little bit of money in the bank, and we're just being very scrappy. So our questions as we move to the breakouts are, how do we move as EPIC programs to meet smaller community needs? And kind of following on that, what do we do in a post-COVID environment to remain relevant and of value to those communities as they face a very new fiscal and social environment? I'll stop there, Marshall. Thanks.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you all our presenters. As noted, this is a workshop, and so now we're going to break out, but it's not a typical workshop where the breakouts are, this is how you do this. This is going to be a breakout activity where we leverage our network values of transparency, sharing experience and resource, and using a just start mantra. Many of you have resources available to help with these problem statements that have been presented. Others may be brand new, but your perspectives can also help us meet the needs of our communities. All of your opinions matter, and so I'm going to talk you through the instructions of how we're going to do this fairly quickly, because I know we're a little behind, and we're going to allow you to choose which breakout room you'd like to go to, which will require the chat box. So your chat box ready. Can you all still hear me okay? Just a verbal affirmation from somebody would be great.
Yes.
Headphones
Yes.
did something silly. Thank you so much.
Yes.
All
yes,
right.
You are heard.
So your first step is going to be that, oh, sorry. First, I'm going to give you a general summary. We're going to break into 3 groups, 1 for each problem statement. So think about the 3 different ones, and I'll give you a chance to do that in a second. When you're in those rooms, we're going to be creating a list of next steps and resources, and also questions to be answered later for those presenter teams to take home with them and be able to use in their communities, but also for you to take home, as many of you have said that you're facing a similar problem in your area to one of these 3. So your first step as an audience member is to choose 1 room to join and put it in the chat now. You can choose the Pennsylvania group, just say PSU or Pennsylvania or Alana. And it's like, how do you help the Launchbox program, which is already doing amazing things, as an EPIC program? What would you do? Dan, you could join the Spain group. How do we develop opportunities for these partnerships to happen in extremely rural areas? And finally, you could join Brandon's room. How do we look at financial modeling and also the COVID-19 response to keep our programs viable, as well as support communities in the way they need it? Chats are coming through already. Great, nice job, everybody. Keep those chats coming through as I do the next instruction. As a group, your second step, once you're in the breakout room, is to build a list of 5 to 10 next steps. Our speakers will facilitate, so that way you don't have to worry about that. Everyone's input matters. We've already assigned some note takers who will share their screens and help grow the list as you all as a group are talking about it. All 3 groups will present during a final share out period at a time that I'll disclose at the end of these instructions. We'll also share the questions that you come up with as a group. Because if you get stuck while you're making these steps, we don't want you to spend time trying to answer questions that are too big to answer in this room. We would rather you put them in a parking lot list, a slide, that we will also share at the end of this presentation, because those questions are also just as important as the list itself. This is an example of what that next steps list could look like. So this is what your goal is as a breakout room to build. La meta es para construir este. This is an example of what a parking lot question slide might be. Some questions you might come up with as you're working in your groups. And there's also, because we've swelled in participation with this activity, with this workshop today, there's an optional third step, and that's if you are not participating in the conversation at the time, but you know of resources, or you've seen resources, or you think they might exist, go Google it, find it, connect it as a URL link into your steps list with your note taker to help us do that. Another way that you're going to be able to do that is our note takers will share the link to the Google slide that they'll be working on to you in the chat box, so you'll be able to quickly add those links as a group. Again, your goal is to work as a team to create these one final product of a list of next steps. Again, we're looking for links to come through kind of like that, or maybe a sub underneath or something.
So there's just 6 of us here?
I don't know. Let's see. Jacob, I saw your presentation for Indiana.
Yeah.
Your program is like my rock star, aspire to, even though it's totally different setup. But
Yeah, it's amazing how different we all are.
yeah.
Thanks for the compliment.
Yeah, when I listen to yours, it's like, oh, you're so with it and organized. And like I
It's
said,
it may look, it might look like that, but you know, it's always different, and it always feels different. So.
Yeah, that was a good presentation there, Jacob. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
We're working
Grant,
with a couple.
Grant, where are you?
I'm in Lubbock, Texas.
Okay.
Texas Tech, and
Great.
I'm thinking big, working with communities in our hinterlands about 20 miles out, and doing a couple of things. So that was valuable. About I was kind of wondering how you got 100 people to show up at some of these asset mapping meetings, and so that's it. I'm working, and I have some community partners out there I'm working with. I'm actually making cold calls and say, hey, I'm from Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Let's do something.
That's great.
Well, I'm assuming this is it for our group. You heard me talk, and Aaron and Eric, maybe we just do a real quick. Grant, Jacob, Julie, and Jordan is acting as our note taker, but if you want to chime in, please do. So, if you, maybe we start on my screen, it's the upper left corner, Grant, with you. I don't think Julie was in the room when you shared where you're from.
Okay, well, Texas Tech University, Duquesne graduate, Pittsburgh, 11 years. That's why I'm here. I know McKees Fort, Tube City, Yuck, Allegheny River Trail. So I couldn't resist. So a little bit of Pittsburgh. So, but yeah, I'm at Texas Tech now. In Lubbock, Texas, way out west. Flat.
Thank you, Grant, and thanks for joining. Yeah, your insights may be really applicable, with familiarity of the region. I find that for a lot of our programs, so much is in the culture of how we approach, and history has deep roots in some of these places. So anyways, Jacob, why don't you go next? Wait.
Jacob Simpson. I am at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana, and we have an existing program called Sustaining Hoosier Communities. We're ending our 3rd year, going into our 4th year, and we work with rural communities specifically, many of which I'm facing, similar issues that you all are seeing.
Great. Julie?
Hi, I'm Julie Kennery, and I'm at Eastern Oregon University, which is in the northeast corner of Oregon on the dry side of the mountains. So very different from Portland. And it's very rural, very, not a lot of population in the whole, eastern half of the state. So our closer connections to metro areas are actually in Washington and Idaho, as opposed to Oregon. And I was very inspired by the story you're telling at Penn State. So I wanted to join this conversation. And by the way, our organization is new. EOU just partnered with another organization to create the Rural Engagement and Vitality Center, and that's what I'm working on, and we just started this work in January.
Wow, all the power to you. Sounds very exciting though. My daughter-in-law is from Eastern Washington State. So yeah, totally different flavor, isn't it?
Yes.
And Jordan, why don't you share where you're joining us from?
Yeah, so I am based in Salt Lake City. I work for the state of Utah, our community development office, and I'm also teaching a workshop at the University of Utah this summer. Classes start next week. And I am originally from Pennsylvania. My family's from Pittsburgh. I grew up in Conneaut Lake, about an hour and a half north.
Mm-hmm.
Cool, thank you. For starters, let's just kind of reiterate the problem. As I had shared, I am not located at McKeesport. We were asked by the administrator, the chancellor of the McKeesport campus for Penn State, to see if maybe this program that I manage could be used to create better relationships, help the city of McKeesport, get further along with its revitalization efforts and so on. The launch box, as Aaron and Eric indicated, has been really proactive, and they hit the nail on the head with this message of hope, building hope, and really coming from within the community to build those relationships. I visited with some of my colleagues from our main campus, and so we've been thinking about how do we do this. One of the issues, and Eric and Aaron, please feel free to correct me here, but one of the issues is, they work through their initiative. Their initiative, this launch box that they described and the activities that they do, are not the EPIC-N model per se. EPIC-N model is supposed to work with classes and, informing, empowering the community that way. And they have been working to empower community, but not necessarily with classes. There is a little bit of hesitation in the community, is my understanding. Well, when I say Penn State at McKeesport, the campus has actually changed its name. It took McKeesport out of the name, and that did not sit well in the community, as you may imagine. And so there are some issues in the relationship. So in addition to McKeesport being the proverbial Rust Belt city, loss of the major employer, right? Population went from about 50,000 people down to under 20,000 now. A lot of blight in the community, not a whole lot of money in the community, and kind of strange relationship with the local campus. However, we are in the Pittsburgh region. Pittsburgh is growing. I think McKeesport, from what I read, recently got some development money, is looking at reinventing itself. There are opportunities, and Pittsburgh also has obviously other institutions in their backyard.
Ilana, I just want to throw out there, one of our challenges being McKeesport is that we're not Pittsburgh proper. So when funders want to do things, if it's not Pittsburgh proper, then it's kind of left out. So we're in this piece where we're literally 15 minutes from downtown Pittsburgh, but if you talk to a funder, we're on the other side of the state. and it's not as I'll just use the word sexy, right? To want to throw money at this little outskirts city. But again, we hope, and it is our intention to leverage the university, right, which is statewide, to maybe bring some light to the point of, back to Ilana's point, is that we changed the name, and it was pure intentioned, but was not seen that way by many in the local government. At that time, our current senator was the mayor of McKeesport. So, it kind of goes now all the way up to that level. But again, he's re-engaged with the campus as well. So again, these relationships are beginning to be rebuilt.
So let's, for an entry point, I don't know if and where, we are looking to you. Where do we start? If we want to stand up an epic-like project with the class, where do we start? Where do we find our partner? What have been some good ways of working with the community that mends the relationship and delivers, baby steps?
I can start, I guess. At our program at IU Bloomington, we try to focus on asset-based community development. So taking the idea that communities, even though there is a lot of destruction over time and despair, communities do have something. And so we try to go in and uncover what they have that they are proud of, and bring that to our own attention, which really empowers the community in the relationship with us. And it also kind of gets outside of those formal leadership structures that you might typically need to work through. So we would, as like an immediate next step, probably try to find like either an organization or a person who's viewed as a leader, and it may not necessarily be a mayor or a government entity. Could be a business or just a nonprofit. It doesn't really matter. Have an initial conversation about like, kind of an asset mapping process, and then see if they'd be interested in getting more people on board into some kind of committee or task force, whatever you want to call it. And then have those people kind of expand the network and do some kind of asset mapping process. That's just what we would do based on the model we use.
So I just want to make sure I understand correctly. The asset mapping would be done by who?
Yeah, we would want it to be done by the community at large in a public meeting for whoever would want to attend. And we would use some kind of smaller core group from the community to spread awareness about that event and activity. And of course they would participate themselves, but it would be hopefully the community at large.
Oh, so this could be like at the launch box, possibly? I mean, maybe Eric and Aaron could facilitate that since they are working with a space. Okay, I can see that happen. And then out of that, you kind of pick the assets or what has been identified as pluses in the community. And
we actually did something close to that. It wasn't exactly a community wide event, but it was a lot of the stakeholders. So in reference to school district, mayor, some of the local nonprofits, There was probably about 50 people in the room. And we did do some asset mapping, and something did come out of it. So there's a new project that we are embarking on called a C3 project with one of the local foundations. So it's a catalytic process. So we are in the process of that asset mapping. So I'm glad to hear we're on the right path.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like and then out of the asset mapping, that's when we tweak out the EPIC-N project.
Yeah, and for us, like faculty are able to get a really good picture of the community from that information, and then able to do like a small project connected to an asset and a community partner that, you know, is related to that asset. And then after that, maybe first informal semester where maybe just a couple faculty members are working on a project with the community. In our experience, a lot of trust is developed. And it seems like the partnerships just exponentially grow from there.
Do you specifically invite faculty to these community meetings?
We haven't in the past, and we want people who are there to participate in the process, and we don't want people to feel like they're being watched or observed.
Oh, okay.
You know?
Well, no, I think that's really critical, right?
Yeah. So if like the faculty are a part of the community themselves, I would, you know, it'd be great if they participated. But yeah, that's a good thought.
Okay. How about Julie or Grant?
I mean, I would think cultivating community partners, going out there and making a contact, and that's, you know, kind of a crazy thing. There was one person that has a theater out here in West Texas. You have a lot of these towns that are their layout is a courthouse with a town square with theaters. I mean, these were built in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, beautiful Art Deco buildings with the roofs rotting out, nothing going on. And they're all within 20 miles of Lubbock. And Lubbock is really, 250,000 people, 350,000. We're it for like hundreds of miles. So we're sort of eventually what I'm thinking is these areas, and one of them is Brownfield, Terry County, which is the #1 wine producing county in the state of Texas. It happens to be a dry county too, which is interesting. So trying to figure out a way that we can build some sort of, there's a route that connects all three of these communities, Littlefield, Level Land, and Brownfield, develop some sort of a cultural corridor. So I've been going to these communities, just walking and talking to people, and I've gotten to meet quite a few people, local business people, some business owners. One lady's got a coffee shop, Dusty Caswell, and they're all excited. They want to do things. And then of course, this is my big plan, but just going out and talking to people. And my background is sales. I used to be the area manager of Pittsburgh before I became a museum person. So that's why I know Pittsburgh really well, the whole area. But just going out and meeting people, and I think that's what Jacob says, building trust and just making these contacts. And then I've got a couple of people now that we might be able to do this asset mapping thing. But just make that initial contact and just get people to know you and know that you really want to do something for them. On the other side is finding faculty that would be willing to help in these projects, which for us has been a little bit of a challenge.
How about Julie? How has been? Are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just thinking, and I feel like I like the model that Indiana uses. That makes the most sense to me, and it feels like it could fit well with what you're doing at Penn State. For us, we aren't really at that stage in our own work. We have a few projects that really are, two of them have come from community groups, not from necessarily like the broader community though. One of the projects that we're working on is for an intergovernmental council that spans across all of Eastern Oregon. And they kind of came to us when they knew that the REV was starting up. They wanted to work with EOU, so that partnership was sort of natural in that way. And it's more, our work is more about how do we connect EOU faculty and students to this project that's coming out of a community group. And I'm interested in listening to all this conversation, mostly because as we move forward and we're looking more into the EPIC model as how we might work, these are the questions that we'll be facing the same you are.
So I'm curious, you know, this, you say this intergovernmental council, they wanted to work with you. Why?
Yeah. Because this is a group that, you know, has gathered together from across the whole Eastern Oregon region because they are interested in writing up a forest plan. So Eastern Oregon has a lot of public lands, and what happens on those public lands really impacts the economy of the communities that are surrounded. And it's really hard for everyone to come to agreement on what practices should happen in those public lands. And so they had a lot of trouble agreeing on a forest plan. And these things are, you know, 25,000 pages long. And there was a lot of conflict from many different kinds of interests and groups about what this forest plan should look like. And so they decided we just need to put together a group of people. So these are county commissioners, natural resource scientists, ranchers, people from all different interest areas coming together to discuss and agree upon what to do. So it's a group that has naturally formed out in our community, our huge community. Like Eastern Oregon is about the size of all of Pennsylvania, actually. And so, but the population of this area is, you know, just a couple 100,000 people in that whole space. So it's that people from that whole region have come together to have these conversations because they're recognizing that they can't move forward without working together in that way. And so there was a very specific need. They really need some data about the socioeconomic conditions in these counties and how do these different things impact those conditions? How could these decisions on the forest impact? And so they came to us wanting to create those profiles so that they could have data to look at. So that's a little background on that particular project.
It got me thinking. So I work out of the Sustainability Institute at Penn State. And when I introduce a project to a class, the first thing I say is, you know, sustainability isn't about recycling. It's about a whole lot of other things, right? And the reason I have to say this is because of the assumptions being made. And so I am wondering if we can work off some of the expertise that a university can offer that is, not readily available through another entity, let's say like a Chamber of Commerce or whatever. So maybe Jacob and Grant, what has bubbled up in your expertise where a university can, fill a need, maybe a very specific need, and it's not really hard to think about it. I think, Jacob, Indiana has a planning program, Penn State does not. And I always feel, and I don't know about your institution in Texas, I think we're really handicapped in this work because we don't have a planning program. That always is like the first step, right?
Well, no.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry. No, our department's relatively new. I've been doing this for about a little over a year. So we're developing things and coming up with ideas. And one thing I found that is the arts. The arts are pretty collaborative, more so than other areas. We're doing a mural project in our neighborhood. I'm the president of the neighborhood association. The associate dean of the School of Art happens to be a neighbor. And then there's an elementary school that's an art school, or a junior high school that's a magnet school that they were all on board with doing this mural project, painting the wall of a power substation, which is part of the city, part of us. The neighborhood association is paying for the materials. Tech is supplying their senior art class, and they're all working with this and breaking up these 40 junior high school students in teams to do each panel. So that was something that just sort of, they bought into that right away. But of course, he's the associate dean, so we can make the call and say they're going to do this for credit. So that was kind of easy, but it's always not that easy. But we're also having success with Level End. This is how this started. This gal owns the Wallace Theater. Her dad bought it, and she wants to resurrect it and do programming. And then there's the art department, School of Music, doing a project with musical programs with actors from the Performing Arts School to do a play there. So it's sort of helping the community, but I mean, it's a lot of the arts that have been, proactive, I think, in doing things. So that's been my experience so far. We'll work on the other parts, but we're working on it, and they're doing things with promotion and tenure that would apply to outreach, engagement. But that's in the works, but we've had a lot of experience with the arts doing things.
I'll be real quick. For us, one of the most productive departments and what we don't see expertise in the community for is public relations work. So our media school has public relations, planning classes, marketing classes, things like that. And the classes are set up specifically for doing that kind of consulting work. And a lot of times that expertise and capacity isn't in the community at all. And students are really savvy with that kind of stuff now. So it makes for a really easy, honestly, it's a super easy partnership, and the products are really predictable. And the community partners are always have new ideas and new tools at their disposal because of it.
Yeah, I think I think this is really good advice. Those items, that you don't go shopping for, the marketing that in small organizations that can really empower small organizations is really good. And I used to run an arts council, so Grant, I hear you. First thing we always, let's go to the college and they can do whatever. So I think, going with low-hanging fruits, right? Seems to be, I also like, so Aaron, what's the climate like in McKeesport? Is there interest in policies, or is that seen as something taken on by somebody else?
Well, it's cold and rainy today. I'm joking. I'm joking. I think that we are policied out. There's an
Into the
abundance.
doing. Right?
Yes, there's an abundance of local governance. There's abundance of politicians, politics, policies, an overabundance. We have a bunch of little towns that probably should be combining, with 2 or 3 police on the police force, 2 or 3 firemen in the fire, and they're still gouging taxes to sustain those instead of combining it. So we're over policied, we're over politicianed, we're over all of that. I think that we have to do, and we have to show momentum, and we have to really sink our teeth into sustainable, scalable job markets, development opportunities in terms of developing land, because part of the reason why the mayor is clearing out all this land is so that someone will come in and see a blank canvas versus seeing the blight that was there, have to pay to remove it, and then have to pay to build on it. So now that the canvas is being blanked and we're getting back to a clean sheet, I think that, we just got to get some doers. We got to get some people who are hungry, who are ready, who can project out the next 5 to 10 years and turn block by block. And if you can get that momentum going, it's happening all through Pittsburgh right now. I don't know the last time you guys have been in the inner city Pittsburgh, but it has become completely meds, eds, and tech. In just a few years
I was the president of the Lawrenceville Historical Society.
Oh, you know all about it.
So,
Lawrenceville,
yeah.
It's a whole new world.
I know well. I know well.
Absolutely. And so there's restaurants there, there's industry, there's new bars, it's happening, it's young, it's yuppie, there's a lot of creativity that's going on. And so the same momentum can be fostered in the Mon Valley, but I really think that we have to mitigate some of the policies, some of the other things that have been inhibitors in the past, and now just get to doing. Get it going, get moving fast, hard, and aggressive towards something, and we'll watch the next 10 years looks completely different.
It looks like we are being asked to leave. So I want to just throw one more thing on our step list. I think in terms of asset mapping, we also need to inventory the assets we have available on campus in terms of programs. Like I said, not having a planning program, but what do we do have?
When Dan pops off, I'll be facilitating the call and helping with the note taking. I just put the links to the Google document. So if you could open that up, it'll save me some time with screen sharing. If you could open that up, and we'll keep notes there as a group. With that, I will, does anyone need a quick geography lesson on where we're talking about in Spain, or are you feeling good?
I need you to tell me where the Google Doc is.
It's in the chat box. Oh,
it's
sorry,
not.
no, it's not. I gave it to one person. There we go. Now it's there.
Thanks.
All right, thank you, everybody. Now you can open it. And thank you all for joining. Alvaro, Goyo, and Juan Jose. I think it might be good to maybe do just a quick like 1 or 2 sentence recap of like what are the resources you're trying to find, and then let people start brainstorming about what they would suggest you do to build that relationship between Bonjar and University of León and the other communities.
Okay, Alvaro or Goyo, maybe you would like to chime in at this moment.
Goyo, vuelves a estar silenciado. La pregunta es entonces qué tipo de recursos y qué cosas estábamos buscando. Si te puedes desilenciar,
Vale.
creo que eres la persona indicada para hablar de la visión general.
Bien, ¿Puedo explicarme en castellano?
Y yo traduzco. Si me das un
ok.
espacio entre cosa y cosa, traduzco.
Perfecto.
I'll be translating.
Bien. Hay un nuevo escenario en el mundo que es un desafío global.
So there's a new scenario, there's a global challenge in the world.
Este nuevo escenario nos permite recapacitar sobre una nueva normalidad.
This scenario allows us to rethink what a new normality would look like.
Una normalidad más justa y ética.
A more fair and ethical normality.
Una normalidad en la que poder incorporar toda la creatividad silenciada por las corporaciones interesadas en una perspectiva solamente economicista.
So a normality which will incorporate the silenced creativity, creativity silenced by large corporations with a more egotistic economic consideration.
Es necesario poder rescatar la creatividad de cada persona, encontrar la base del entusiasmo para la vida.
You have to reincorporate every person's creativity and find the optimism for life.
Es necesario despertar la esperanza que está hipnotizada.
We have to wake up some hypnotized hope.
Bien. Dentro de este escenario,
So in this scenario,
hay una técnica que se llama permacultura.
there's a technique called permaculture.
Es una técnica para diseñar la vida de una forma más justa.
A technique to design a more just life.
En esta técnica incluye todas las formas de relación con el planeta, con las personas y con un reparto justo.
So it allows us to reestablish a relationship with the earth, with other people, and with a more just distribution.
Con esta matriz de pensamiento es posible hacerse un programa de preguntas específicas en cada área
With this
rural.
matrix of thought, we can make a program with questions in each area.
Esto nos permite repensar, encontrar opciones naturales como las opciones que encuentra el agua cuando se encuentra con un obstáculo.
So we can rethink and think of new solutions, like the water when it finds a new obstacle.
Hay que poder nadar en la humildad para poder encontrar el diseño de la naturaleza, la ingeniería de lo natural.
So we have to learn from what's natural, find the engineering of nature, the design of nature.
Desde esta perspectiva, hemos preparado un plan concreto.
So from this perspective, we've designed a plan. Lo siento.
Un plan que nos permite pensar en el rescate del interés para la repoblación.
So a plan to find again the interest in reverting the depopulation, the problem of depopulation.
Se trata de concretar los hechos motivacionales para que las personas puedan venir a vivir al campo de nuevo con ilusión.
So we can find the motivations for people to go back to live in the rural areas with a renewed optimism.
Para esto estamos estudiando y hemos estudiado una de las mejores prácticas que han sido el ejemplo de las tierras altas de Escocia.
So to this end, we've been studying some best practices in the Highlands of Scotland.
Un lugar en el que han vuelto a encontrar la manera de repoblar más de un 40% las áreas en menos de 20 años.
Where they've had a program where they've been able to repopulate in some 40% the area that they're working in.
Hoy las tierras altas de Escocia son un lugar al que las personas cultas quieren vivir.
So today the Scottish Highlands are a place where cultured people want to live.
Bien, creemos que la vida en las ciudades ha sido una etapa pasada y se ha podido ver en la extrema fragilidad que nos ha puesto el COVID-19, ¿no?
So we think that urban life is some part of the past, and we can see this in part in the effect that the COVID crisis has had.
En nuestra región podemos encontrar cuáles eran las razones antiguas de por qué se vivía, la razón de existir de los lugares.
In our region, we can find the reason that people live there, the reason for the existence of these places.
Por ejemplo, buscando en la etimología de la palabra de nuestro ayuntamiento, Boñar.
For example, looking at the etymology of our own municipality, even, Boñar.
En el año 917 se llamaba balneario, lugar de baños.
In the year 917, it was called balneare, which is a kind of a spa, not Boñar.
Esta etimología nos habla de la razón de existir de esta comunidad.
So this etymology talks to us about the reason this community existed in the first place.
Existen dos fuentes de aguas termales que fueron olvidadas.
You have two fountains of thermal water which have been forgotten.
Y que son, una de ellas, el agua más nitrogenada de toda España.
One of the most nitrogenated waters in Spain.
En el principio del siglo XX, Boñar se transformó en un centro termal.
In the early 20th century, Boñar turned into a thermal center.
Sin embargo, esta tendencia de un turismo termal cambió porque cambiaron las velocidades de las vidas, ¿no?
So this tendency towards the use of the waters changed because the rhythms and what was happening economically changed as well.
Ahora, siguiendo la experiencia de Bill Mollison, el catedrático que descubrió la permacultura y que desarrolló la permacultura, nos enfrentamos a una nueva posibilidad, ¿no?
The man who developed the idea of permaculture, we're finding a new possibility for our own area.
Esta posibilidad es la autosuficiencia energética.
And that's economic self-sufficiency.
Yeah,
Okay.
So Goyo,
Okay.
you've done
Thank
a
you, Marcel.
muchas gracias. Goyo, muchas gracias, Goyo. Alvaro and Juan Jose, I think Goyo has done a great job at presenting the assets of the region.
Indeed.
Can you translate that back to Goyo, Alvaro?
Oh, I was typing it, but yes.
Okay, perfect.
Creo que Goyo desarrolló bien la idea de los, la base material, los recursos que tiene el lugar.
And you also have a list of connections you've already built and the nodes of community and university that you want to work with. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm typing it down.
Okay, so then the people that are here from the Epic Network are experts. They know how to build this, to build out what you want. Like they've done that in their communities. Like I've seen Laura and Jane and G build a lot of things that are similar, but in different regions to what you're describing. And so what I'm going to do right now is share my screen so they can get their geographical sense of the area and the nodes that you've identified. And then that way they can come into the discussion and offer their resource to you. So for those of you who aren't from Spain, this is Spain. Portugal's on the left. No. So I put this little presentation together using Google Earth. Again, Spain. We're looking at this part of Spain, the high Porma region, which took me a while to figure out what that region was. They've identified, I think, Alvaro, correct me if I'm wrong, but they've identified some folks here in the University of Leon area who might be willing to participate and help. It's I think I took this down. It's about 35 kilometers, 20 miles to the area that they're trying to work with, the area of Bonyar, which is the main community there. And they've identified these 3 other regions. Again, that's Bonyar. You can get a feel. It's a little bit of a metro, like it has some metro feel. This is one of the rural communities. You get a feel for like, what are we working for? There's some of the Google points, you know, some churches. There's probably some other things that are there that I'm not familiar with. And you also, I'll zoom back out at the end of this after I look at the other communities to show you some of the natural assets that Goyo was talking about. So this is like a very rural part that follows the Rio, or the river, sorry. And this is the 3rd little community hub that they're looking to partner with. And again, zooming out a little bit, you can kind of see here the mountainous region, if it doesn't freeze on me, has some really amazing like natural aesthetics that could be great for tourism that I think he was talking about, both on this side and this side. So with that, I'm going to open it up to you all to talk about like, what would you do to build, to like try and reach those goals of driving interest in that local area and also do an epic partnership, because that's kind of what they've been building. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to unmute and start taking notes.
Alvaro, okay, I think we can move on to the slides, right? It's yeah, on the comprehensive presentation.
Yeah, we went through those. But G, were you about to say something?
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was going to ask about the local relationship in these places. Has that already been built? Are there any community champions identified?
Alvaro, can you answer that? I think you might know the answer to that.
Yeah, we've been working with the municipality of Leon, specifically with the mayor, Pepe, he's very interested in these things. He's a open-minded guy. Kind of distracted recently, but he's in our square, in our corner rather.
And you also had the mayor of Bonyar too, right? Or
no, that's who I mean. The mayor of Bonyar. Leon, don't know the guy.
And then what about your local neighborhood folks, like those 3 separate communities? I know you are one of them, right?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm the president of the community of La Losilla. Goyo is in the neighboring community of Las Bodas, though that doesn't have a town council, and he's working with some other town councils to see how we can move on from there. Although we were wanting to start with mine because it's easier.
This is Laura at the University of Mississippi. And it is incredible to just be sharing and learning from you guys. This is really, really cool. So thank you guys for taking the time. Hearing that you have multiple municipalities or elected officials involved, one suggestion that I have from the work that we've done just in the pilot phase of our EPIC program, we were working with 3 different municipalities that were not in the same region. So I think you guys have a great opportunity here to build sort of a network or a coalition among those different leaders. I wonder, again, it sounds like you may be doing separate projects in each of these pueblos or towns, but like if you could also think about taking a more regionalized approach, I think that could be a really valuable way for you all to begin to network and serve in that facilitating role.
Yeah, and that's specifically Royo's approach, right? He wants to start doing some projects in individual places to give things legs to stand on. But the idea is that things have to have a more regional perspective.
Sweet. I think that's really wise.
This is Jane from Indiana University, and we do a lot of work with our local communities. We work primarily in rural communities, and our rural communities don't have a lot of assets and capacity. They also don't have a lot of governmental leadership. So we look a lot to resident level involvement in our rural communities. So I put a quick question in the chat box about engaging resident level involvement to really bolster the spread of your work. We find that there's sometimes a lot of suspicion about the involvement of government officials in getting work done. And we find a lot of success in really trying to find who are the people within communities who are trusted by that community, and they might not even hold an elected title. They just may be somebody who is very well known in that community, or maybe even to retired school teachers seem to be a really good resource for us. Yeah. But really thinking about that resident level and generating a lot of interest within your community at that level.
Yeah.
This is G from Web
If I may ask a question, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead. Well, just a quick question that I wanted to put in the table for whoever wants to do that. What works best in terms of creating the relationship between university and communities in your experience when you're ready?
Jane, do you want to take that or?
Thanks, G. What's worked best for us is everything rests on the idea of listening first, and we're not selling anybody on anything. We have to listen to what communities have, what assets they have that they're willing to share, they're willing for us to utilize and build upon. And then I think in addition to that, we really have to reassure communities that we're not coming in with ideas and obligating the community to follow our ideas, but we're coming in to listen and in partnership and in true collaboration with them, bring new assets into the community, new experience, new expertise to help the community itself move forward in a direction that they want to go. And if there isn't that community support, if there isn't that buy-in at that very, very grassroots base level, it's not going to make for a successful relationship. That means creating groups of committees of activated residents who work together in partnership. They bring their networks to the table. When we show up in communities, we're nobody, and nobody trusts us. And in order to build trust for what we're trying to do, we have to enable our communities to generate that trust for us and to make us be an invited entity in that community. If we simply go in and say, we got a great idea, let's do this, which, to be frank, many times our faculty have done in the past, it's not well received. This is going to be this is the work of a lifetime, and universities like to think about semesters and being done in a year, and you're really addressing the work of multiple people's careers over the course of their careers to actually affect change. And if universities can approach communities with that level of sensitivity and authenticity, then I think that we set up a relationship for success. But it has to start with a very authentic partnership. Sorry, G, I hope I didn't take your thunder.
No, that was excellent point and great conversation. I can just add to that. So one thing we really focus on is moving slow to move fast. So in the front end of things, we really take our time to build that trust with the community, really get to know them and listen to them. So one point I think we heard that in UPenn, Penn State's presentation too, where they talked about meeting the community where they are. So I think that is an important point where we first start talking to what do they really want. And the first conversation usually is really helpful when we talk about what do you really have and what do you care about. So talking about assets and then really going towards what the community wants. And then, trying to, we want to talk about the problems and issues, but then kind of going with the positive look at the community and really seeing at how do we build community, again, going to asset-based development and building capacity of a community. I think that would be a good start, but letting the community really, frame their own problem, frame their own solutions, and really working together. So I think it's the same thing Jane just said.
So just to summarize this activity down, just to kind of get to a closing point, I know I kept it really, really short. If we take a look at these 5 steps, I don't think the order is right. Or maybe it is all the same steps. Do you have any advice on a sub of meeting the community where they're at? What would you do first to see if they've done that or not?
I think since we do have the mayor involved, maybe going through someone trusted and finding other community champions, people like the school teacher, sometimes it is the faith-based organization, really having more conversation. Where are these points or these key person that the community already trusts? Having that conversation with people you already have a relationship with.
Nice. Any other burning questions? You got one more question, Alvaro and Juan Jose, for your group to ask to everybody else in here. Do you have any other questions?
You had mentioned the population pyramid, the fact that 47% people, he says, are older than over 60. So does that affect the way that we go about things? Maybe not so much a school teacher as the old folks center. I don't know. So in your experience, because you've worked with rural communities, everyone has trouble with depopulation these days. How's this affected your work?
So, all of our rural populations tend to have a median age that is much older than our urban populations. And what is consistent among all segments of the population is what they think about for the future of their community as in regards to children, in regards to their children, other people's children. What does this community have to offer so that so that everybody doesn't leave? People want to see that future of their communities where they were born and raised. They don't want them to go away. So don't underestimate older folks for having really creative ideas about how they can encourage a stable and sustainable future for their communities. I think it's been really fascinating to see in our communities that the most dogmatic people who are fighting for their communities are retired folks, because they understand that if their kids leave, there's no one to look after them, selfishly, right? And there's not going to be a community left that they recognize. I think recognizing the opportunity of all of those quality of place initiatives that are going to make for brilliant schools, brilliant employees who want to live and reside and have a great quality of life in these towns will ultimately enable the elderly population to remain as well. Because that's the other things that we see in rural populations is if we don't address it, elderly populations leave because there are no resources for them as they age to stay in the local community. So I would not underestimate the elderly population to actually promote change.
Okay, great. Christopher, Alberto, as people who are running other programs in more Spanish-speaking areas of the world. Do you have any other suggestions before I close this out?
Sure, I do have one idea that I wanted to express. You know, sometimes, of course, our main intention with establishing the relationship with the community is letting them speak and listen to them and get their wants and needs first. But sometimes the communities have not had the chance to really think through what they want or what is the capabilities as a community they have. So as a conversation started, it might be a good idea also to have a list of assets that the community might have they have not seen. You know, like you've talked about permaculture and tourism, cuisine, culture, any of those assets that you believe that might be conversation started for them to think about how to utilize those assets and their benefit. That'd be a good idea to just bring to the table.
Hi everyone, this is Adalberto. I think my suggestions will be similar to whatever to what Christopher said. Something that worked with us is one good place to find those assets could be associations, civic associations who are already working on similar themes, or that they might have some ideas. Just as a quick review, or for those who don't know, one of the things that we did in Ensenada for UABC was to get involved the Sister City Committee, which is community based, and we have entrepreneurs, we have social associations, and they helped us to follow up in the project, and they also gave us some good ideas on what to follow. So that could be a good starting point to get more ideas and more people involved. Thank you.
Thank you all. I have to close this down and move us back to the main group, but thank you so much for your amazing input and for all your hard work.
The voice of God. Higher pitch than I expected and a little more computerized than I thought, but similar. And then I think the other question that I'm really interested in right now is, as we see cities pull back and be just fearful of anything that is not core services, it occurs to me that, and I know that there have been a couple of folks across the network, and Jamie Masterson at Texas A&M was really way out in front on this, on how the EPIC programs can help their local communities through disaster, coming out of disaster situations. So I'm curious about how we could do that as well. And so I'm really, I don't know how to find out what the community needs are and how we can then go about doing that university community matching around those needs. So our three things that we're trying to do is develop a list of next steps, or kind of steps that programs could take. And with that, and then if we have questions that we want to just kind of raise as a parking lot, and maybe one of those questions, Justin, is what our community needs in a post-COVID environment. That might actually be one right there. And how do we go about determining those? And then the last one is, if you end up with resources, or if you have in your head resources that you know about that we collectively want to share with the network, we want to kind of record those as well. So ideas on steps that programs can take.
So I'll jump in because this is something I've been struggling with since we started, let's say that. We're in our third year, and while we are just across the river from St. Louis, the other communities that we're surrounded by are very small and largely rural communities. So just recently, last week, in fact, I had a wonderful conversation with the Illinois Leadership Council, which is one of these municipal leagues. And I would start perhaps with that group because those folks are in constant communication with municipalities and with the corporate world, for that matter, in our case at least. And at least through those voices, and I realize it's not the entire community's voice, right? But through those voices, she was able to identify some very clear and specific points of action that we could take. For example, a lot of them apparently in our communities are talking about redundancy of services. And as the budgets tighten, they're thinking about how can they, for the first time in some instances, finally collaborate and share resources and think of themselves as a region instead of an individual municipality independent. So I would recommend reaching out to those folks.
And that's specifically on the how to determine the post-COVID needs of communities?
Correct. Yeah, what's on their table right now,
yeah.
They have time and commitment for. There are lots of things, of course, on their desk to do, but the optics of some of those projects right now are not going to be good if they pick them up. And they're not as important, of course, too, at this moment.
This is Sam in Texas Tech. Connie, are you referencing an organization like the Association of Governments? Is that what you're referencing?
Yes, that type of organization.
And I'll take it a step further. If you want it, I think that's arguably one of the best places to start, not just for COVID, but for other things, because there are tons of different types of projects that the region bids for with federal government, the state government, and it runs through them. And potentially there are a lot of things that are still on their to-do list that they don't have the capacity to do. And they may engage the institution for an opportunity to do some of those things. I gotta find the mute button.
Lindsay, I hate to put you on the spot, but Lindsay and I work together in the state of Washington, and we have a shared partner in the Association of Washington Cities. I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about how they have, to greater and lesser degree, worked with us, helped us, and then maybe your program is a little different than ours and works with smaller communities. Maybe you could talk about how you've thought about designing for that environment.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of working with the Association of Washington Cities for Washington, I guess what I've experienced is we got some startup funding when we were first getting going. And from that point forward, it's been a willingness to kind of share requests for proposals and an interest in sharing stories around the projects that we've engaged in. I think the other thing that I've engaged with those folks is just getting a pulse on what are the trends and what is their appetite for certain kinds of projects. You know, I'm really thinking about, can we shift more toward climate change focused projects, and trying to get a sense for like, what are your conversations as an association with city partners around the state, and is this a realistic shift? So I feel like it's been a really good pulse check for me. And I guess in terms of my work with smaller partners, one of the things that we've had a bit of success with is engaging in a program. It's called the Community Engagement Fellows, which is a different program on Western's campus, but essentially they show up and facilitate cohort meetings for a whole year with faculty and community members and students. And it's a process for engaging, like, what are the questions in those rural communities, and how do we show up and listen and understand those questions for like a whole year before we say, okay, what are we gonna do together? And so I've been participating in all of the rural cohorts to understand the needs, build trust, and then from there engage the projects and pull in the right faculty, so that it's not the helicopter in and save the community thing. And we have been we've gotten a little bit of grant funding through that process by saying, okay, now we know what the projects are. We know this is an unincorporated area. There's not a city even to get funding from, but like a bank paid for a few projects for this coming year. So maybe I'll leave it at that. But I don't think we've figured it out entirely, but that's where we're putting our efforts right now.
And do you have does Western Washington University support the program financially, like either in staff or other resources?
It was sold as a self-sustaining program, so that's still the way that it's talked about at the university, but we've been a little bit short in the last 2 years, and the university at this point realizes the program is valuable enough that they're going to keep letting it happen, even if it's not totally self-sustaining. But that was the initial idea.
Yeah, ours as well, and similarly, they're coming in to cover our overages. Does anyone else have maybe in terms of thinking about things to do before going out and partnering with small communities, in addition to finding out what community needs are, might be thinking about what your programmatic needs are. What are your fixed costs to make these things successful? Because ultimately, I think one of the things that we found is that they run on staff, and it's easy to burn staff out if they're doing too much. So I think about, when you have a faculty member who is both, leading the whole program plus doing their faculty work plus, it's a lot. It can be done, but when I looked at the network, I don't see people doing it for that long before they just can't take it on. And the partnership between faculty and staff becomes really, really important. And so, and that from a resource perspective, the university goes, "Ooh, that costs money." So where does that come from? And maybe if you're a state school that has a relationship with extension, possibly you might tag into that. Lindsay mentioned, partnering with other extant programs on campus for projects and maybe faculty. But I think that for us, one of the first things was really getting a handle on how did we want to run this and what's that going to cost at the very baseline, the skeletal model. And then what would it be if we got, more money? What would we do with it? So we've figured out both the fixed cost and the cost at scale. It's very different if we do 15 projects versus 30 projects.
Okay.
And go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, no, so I'm at Penn State. I actually work with Alona. And one of the things we've been talking about in terms of corporate sponsorships is thinking about pitching to them, supporting students as interns in these programs, either as grad student interns who are program coordinators or undergrads, and saying, you're getting a twofer by supporting this. You're supporting a student and you're supporting a community. So as you're retrenching your corporate dollars in terms of how much you can give for community service and things like that, think about programs like this where you can get double your hit by helping both students and both communities. And so we're turning to try to see if we can pitch it that way to get more corporate sponsors especially for our urban centers in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, where we actually have corporations in Pennsylvania.
Peter, just following up on that, that's a great idea. Do you also, do you pitch it, and maybe this is a third win, right? As that if they get good interns, they might keep them. Is there a self-interested element for the corporate sponsors?
That's an interesting idea, and we haven't thought about that yet. We're just starting to do this because our programs in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia have PepsiCo dollars because we have Pepsi as our campus beverage. So we got like a big pot of money that the university then divided up. So we've been supporting some of our students and their community projects in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. But that is an interesting idea to think about as that third win, and we haven't done that yet. So.
Anyone else who hasn't yet spoken have either questions, list of things that they think they might need to do to either get started or pivot to a different way of operating, or resources that they might want to give.
Hi, my name is Taylor. I work with InPartner, which is the EPIC program at the University of Mississippi. When I was listening, Laura Martin is my supervisor. If you know her, you should. She's amazing. But when you were speaking earlier on the slides, I was thinking about this and I just wanted to share. So I personally am an AmeriCorps Vista member. It's a national service program that focuses on fighting poverty through education. Obvious connections through EPIC and just the work, community engagement work as a whole. But one thing that we're doing, the InPartner and the McLean Institute, which InPartner is housed in at the University of Mississippi, how we're trying to be responsive and to our partners' needs, our community partners' needs. We work with 3 communities in Mississippi. We are very lucky to be very tapped into our local nonprofit networks, and how we're tapped into those is, well, one, just years of longstanding relationships in Mississippi, but also through other AmeriCorps Vistas. So AmeriCorps Vistas are typically stationed at nonprofits, so we have someone on the ground be like, okay, well, this nonprofit in our partner community needs this, and we're able to connect through the school district and all that kind of stuff. So we do a cost share with AmeriCorps Vistas and the nonprofits in our communities, and that helps kind of ease the burden for everybody. And it's able to help us, first of all, build trust, which is like key number 1. And once we're still in the pilot phase of our program, but once we kind of pull out of our communities, there's still that sustainability aspect, and also a capacity building aspect, which, rural Mississippi need a lot of capacity building in cities and organizations.
Thanks, Taylor. So I'm just kind of thinking about Justin's very difficult work and trying to track all this. Let me see if I have a couple of summary things so per Sam's point that there may be.
I can quickly share my screen, Brandon, if you like. Hold on 1 second.
Well, I'll just kind of go over what I heard, and you can see if it works. Per Sam's point around there might be regional business and other organizations, governmental organizations that can help inform what communities could be working on, and that is a both regular and post-COVID environment situation. And Lindsay and I have found that with our Association of Washington Cities is actually one of the things that they're probably the best at. It's, the funding model for us, and anyhow from them, has been very small, but the information, both sharing and pulse taking, I think is what Lindsay said, that seems to work really well. Then there's a partnership questions around both on campus and off. So Taylor mentioning the use of even AmeriCorps. So we have a federal, bringing federal resource matches in to help, but also thinking about nonprofits in the region who might be doing service provision or working on these projects and might be interested in the kind of work that the university can do and partnering in a lot of different ways. Funding opportunities both on campus and off. Are there campus funds that are available? And I think, Peter mentioned using campus monies, like I think it was the PepsiCo money that's available, but in addition, thinking about economic engines or companies in the region, like for example in Washington, before Boeing decided to not become a airline manufacturer anymore, they were a massive, and may yet still be later on, engine to our local economy, and they could easily want to contribute to a city in which they have a plant. So an Everett model of an EPIC program to do Everett community development would be a natural kind of thing. So partnering with industry. And then we talked a little bit on just the post-COVID new environment. And I'm wondering if there's anything more that we can push on that a bit. I like this, Peter mentioned a win-win model of talking about our programs, I had a moment of maybe brilliance, maybe it was just serendipity in the shower this morning, because that's where all good ideas come from for me. And it was coming back to the legislature. I'm going to just draft on Peter on this with an idea to the legislature, because what we're hearing, and my guess is that it's similar all over the place, is that cities are retrenching and pulling back. And yet we know that as folks in these models with universities, that we have terrific resources at a relatively low cost, or that is to say, perhaps a high value to these communities. And so if we could talk to legislatures about how they could fund the communities themselves, so they're not necessarily paying for higher education, because my guess is that y'all are in a similar situation, and that's a discretionary resource in the city budget. But if they pushed money out to communities to then pay for working with their local universities to essentially subsidize these EPIC models, you get a triple win. You get, the communities need to figure out how to come out of COVID in terms of social and economic impacts. The universities and the students particularly, they're seeing a pullback on professional training opportunities and job opportunities and internships. And so this provides that, as well as educating the sons and daughters of any given state, which the legislature always likes. And the programs themselves, knowing that they have a good model, are in danger of seeing very, very rough times, in as much as they are tied to the finances of their local communities. So this seems to me to be a really good way to get resources at the community level. We are shovel ready, as it were, to come into communities. And I'm curious about what you all think about that as a strategy for organizing. We've been talking about it in the state of Washington for a while, but it occurred to me today that rather than COVID being the thing that kills EPIC model programs, it actually might be the thing that highlights EPIC model programs.
Brandon, with that, and I've been wanting to say this since we started, I wanted to find a way to throw it in there. So I'm getting ready to throw it out there. Watching the news, I can't remember what day it was, but you guys have what do they call them, murder bees up in your area. I said it, murder bees. If you haven't heard about it, apparently they're like these 2-inch bees that are attacking other bee colonies and, in essence, turning into meatballs or whatever they call it. I don't know. Anyhow, my point is this. As you're pitching that idea, COVID is bringing to light problems that already existed in American society. It doesn't matter if it's, from New York City down to Sudan, Texas, which, if you drove 30 miles an hour, you'd pass it and never see it. The point is, mitigation is the thing that we ought to be working on, and universities are, as you stated, we're equipped to do those types of things. And if anybody thinks that this is the last thing that we're going to have to battle, just ask the state of Washington and Oregon, because not only they have to deal with coronavirus, they also have to deal with 2-inch bees that are coming in and truly jeopardizing food stores. And so, and I'm meaning food production. So you may want to just consider adding in mitigation.
That's an excellent point. Anne, I'm looking at you. I just want to make sure if you have anything that you'd like to add from the CSU perspective, or questions that you might have.
I don't. You're giving me a lot of ideas to think about who to contact. And I'm a little bit worried about, we don't have funding at the university for this, and I'm a half-time civic engagement director, and we're looking at budget cuts and potentially furlough. So we work with a lot of small communities that don't have a lot of money. So anyway, but lots of food for thought.
Yeah, you know, it strikes me, and this is a conversation that Lindsay and I have had as well. There's probably an amount of money that, and I think Connie said something about having a project ideas that would be insensitive in this time, right? I think that's a very important thing for us to kind of recognize. And there's probably an amount of money that is a reasonable ask for small communities. In fact, our experience has been, even prior to the EPIC program, if you don't ask for any money, if they have no skin in the game, staff is likely to abandon the projects, or the staff that you're working with in one department have not gotten full buy-in from other departments. And so your project is limited by that. So I'm interested in, for a very small community, what's an amount that's reasonable for them to chip in just to feel bought in? And then if you come back to that, what are the fixed costs of your program? So, and your half-time, how much of your work would the university want to be funded from outside sources? Can we cobble together through a bunch of smaller pots a reasonable amount? Maybe it's not the full amount, but to keep a program alive.
Yeah, I have had partners do that, but that money has to come through foundation, and then they take 40%, and it's almost not worth it for the amount of money. But the AmeriCorps and Vista Point is very interesting to me. I don't have any connection with them in our area, and that's a really great option to think about.
Yeah, Taylor, thank you for bringing that up. Any last points? I think in a couple of seconds, we're going to get sucked back into the other group and disappear into ether.
One point, Anne, you raised the question of like foundation grants being sucked away into overhead, and that's one of the things we deal with. So we charge our communities $500 for a single project. That's the smallest amount that we found is in the game. And we've gotten exemptions from our finance office saying that's just too small, we won't do it. The only problem is we have to get an exemption for every single one of those 500, which is nuts. So what we've been thinking about, going to the point of municipal associations, is thinking about if the Pennsylvania Municipal Association was our partner, we jointly apply for a foundation grant, they administer it, pay us as a subcontractor, then the overhead doesn't get taken out. So that's one of the things we're trying to explore. So
that's a great idea. Justin, would you be willing to lead us in the reporting back using your notes? Would that be okay? Are you comfortable with that? You're muted.
I would rather give it to you, Brandon, if that's okay. You might be able to like really explain what I just wrote down.
Okay. Would anybody else like to represent us? Since Connie's not here, I say that we elect her. Let's take a very quick vote. Oh no, there she is.
I'm plugging in, my battery's dying. I'm still here.
We were going to elect you to represent us back in the other group. So Justin, do you want to share your screen and just so we can see what we have in terms of a list?
You see it right now?
We can, thank you.
Okay. So we have reach out to association of governments, types of organizations, getting a pulse of trends, understanding the conversation across communities, creating an engagement fellowship to collect questions and needs, assist in building credibility for funding.
Is that, sorry to cut you off. The engagement fellowship, is that the AmeriCorps basis, or is that something I'm forgetting?
That's the one that, is it Taylor or Lindsay was talking about?
Oh, right, the Western Washington, right, yep.
Yeah. And then, I forget who wrote, I'm not sure it's Peter, pitch to corporate sponsor about how working with your program is doubling the impact, using economic engines in the community, partnering with industry. And then we have tapping into AmeriCorps Vistas to build intentional relationships with orgs. This is the whole partnership, thinking about MPs that are working with communities. And then the last piece of reaching out to legislatures, thinking of the terms of COVID. When communities are pulling back, EPIC programs can be highlighted, especially during these times. And then some questions that I've picked up along the way. Is there anything I've maybe missed?
Anybody have any additions to those lists before we jump back?
This is Connie. I'd like to add one more thing about using the grant dollars to support these projects. I completely understand the reservations because of the overhead costs. And I've been in that camp for quite a while, and until about, I've had quite a few eye-opening conversations here recently. So I met with our Office of Research and Projects folks last week, and they understand this a lot better than me and maybe some in the room here with us, and have convinced me that there is a way to recover those indirect costs to help cover the expenses for those communities that don't have budgets. So I would maybe develop a relationship with them. Yes, we're still going to lose some of those dollars. We don't get 100% of those costs back to us. But it does look like if we generate enough of them, we might be able to support a grad assistant, or again, cover the cost of a community participating, or reduce my salary costs too, as the university's looking to, do their own budgetary cuts that definitely are coming. So that'd be another relationship I would encourage you to develop.
Connie, I think that's a really great idea of the relationship with the Office of Sponsored Programs, or whatever your unit is. It's a place that most of us never want to deal with, but ours has been terrific, and I'll be the only person to ever have said that out loud, right? But following you, they've been very good to help negotiate overhead rates, and our university hates to do that. But our typical overhead rate is 54%. An overhead rate for this would be like a special project is 37%. But if we can get a desk in your community where we can sit every now and then and talk with you, it's down to 26%. So it becomes more manageable, but I love the relationship thing. I want to thank you all for a productive conversation, and I will see you back in the other room momentarily.
So Pennsylvania came up with a lot of things, I'm sure. But Alana, while everyone's reading this note, why don't you go ahead, and whoever from your group wants to share that one key takeaway you learned from everyone in your room, or that you want to take with you, will you please share it?
I'll volunteer in an effort to be timely. The key takeaway was really asset mapping and going with what the institution, the university, offers on site. The community in our case, and in Rust Belt communities in particular, are looking for action, it seems. I have identified the need, and we realize that as an institution, we have things to offer, whether it's with facilitation of asset mapping, or whether it's through the assets housed within the university, that can bring things to the community that and can be acted upon, so everything very forward thinking, very active. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. I'm going to jump to the next slide. Spain, go ahead and choose one, and I'll flip through the slides as you're choosing one person.
Okay. Well, I think the takeout from pretty much all of them is optimism in the community. It's easy to start seeing everything as a very dark future, especially when we see demographic trends. But we can be optimistic about what especially an elderly population might do when it sees the future of the community. So we have a lot of natural energy that we can take advantage of.
Great, awesome, thank you. It was so great to have you all with us. I really appreciate it. Brandon, let's have you quickly summarize one key thing.
I think that, and I'm going to echo the Penn State folks about relationship building. And it's relationship building across a number of sectors to do a number of things. And those things would include really finding out what our schools can contribute, particularly in a post-COVID environment, to our communities, and other organizations that might actually contribute not only to that kind of knowledge, but also to piecing together small amounts of funding here and there from a variety of sources to make our programs viable. So relationship building.
Great, thank you so much. Before I do my end of recording summary, I'm going to stop my share, and why don't you turn your webcams on and give you all of yourselves a round of applause for all the hard work that everyone did, for your patience, your preparation, your note taking, your everything. It's been great to have you all on the call and doing it. So joining in on the Epic Network's efforts together, I really appreciate it. I'm going to sound off on my regular talking points at the end of a webinar. If you'd like to stick around for questions and answer, more discussion, feel free. I'm going to leave the room open for another little bit of time. Let me just close out this little talking point here, and thank you again for coming. So you'll get a feedback link in an email. Please do give us feedback on this session, especially because we tried something very new for our network. And reach out and celebrate our presenters using this hashtag so we can elevate your comment to them. You'll be emailed a link to view the recording of the session and all the PowerPoint slides that were created through it sometime in the next week or so. You can view more of our events that are upcoming. We have 2 more key presentations and a third for Epic Alumni Champions, which Jordan, one of our note takers, is helping me facilitate. So if you have any alumni champions, let me know. This has been the Hope Wanted presentation as a part of the 2020 Epic End webinar series. Thank you all for attending, and we will see you next time.